Welcome back, YouTube. Today I am half naked, which means we're going to be talking about some pretty damn important stuff. Today we're going to be looking at shoulders, and I'm going to teach you guys a couple of the most common mistakes that I see people making with their overhead pressing that is really limiting their strength and their potential to build muscle in their shoulders. I guarantee that the vast majority of you are making one, if not both, of these mistakes. So let's go. Alright, so with overhead pressing, I kind of know where your mind is probably going to go when you're thinking about these common mistakes. You're probably thinking, okay Eugene, you're going to be talking to us about like elbow position, or you're going to be talking about the bar path, or you're going to be talking about arching your back too far forwards or too far back or anything like that. And let me tell you, those things for overhead pressing are really important, but they're not the things that I focus on. Because I believe that those mistakes, those errors, those cues that are often given are usually going to be a factor of other mistakes being made. And that's where we come down to these two humongous mistakes that I see just about every single person making with their overhead pressing that is limiting their gains. So let's have a look at this. We have a barbell. And the first mistake that I see people making is not appropriately setting themselves up with what kind of range of motion they're meant to be using. So a common mistake people make is I'll bring the bar right down to their chest here. So you can see the bar is touching onto my collarbone or my upper chest region, and then I'll press straight overhead. Now, that looks, for all intents and purposes, pretty good. My elbows are tracking in a pretty good position. The bar part is probably tracking in a pretty much a straight line. I'm staying quite centered and balanced. I'm not overextending through my lower back or flare my rib cage up, so it looks, pretty good. However, that's with a really lightweight, and you can't really make a lot of judgments with a very lightweight. When it starts to get heavier and heavier, a lot of the issues will start to manifest, and they're issues that should have been addressed from the very first rep, or even before grabbing onto a weight. So what I mean by this is the mistake I see people making is overreaching and overextending too far beyond what they can control. So what I recommend people do is, first of all, without any weight at all, bring their arms overhead, as if we're doing like a chin-up or a pull-down motion, and seeing how far they can pull their hands down under a degree of control. See if they're trying to do this pull-down motion and squeeze through their back musculature. Now what you'll see here is, depending on your mobility, depending on your flexibility, depending on your structure, your hands will fall to a certain point. You can sort of picture here, if there was a barbell in my hand right now, that bar actually wouldn't be touching my chest. It'd be slightly off my chest at the moment. But this range here, is as far as I can comfortably pull down using my upper back muscles. I can stabilize as well. Now, the issue is when we put weights into our hands, whether it's a dumbbell or a barbell or whatever it may be, with this kind of position here, gravity will pull my joints into a bigger range of motion. And just because a joint can go to a range of motion doesn't mean we should be training that range of motion, especially with heavy loads, which is what we're going to be doing with, say, an overhead press. So what ends up happening is we've got a barbell with this double overhand grip. We've done this pull-down motion. I found this is my comfortable range of motion. But if the barbell now pulls me down even lower, I'm going to start to compensate. So what might that compensation look like? So to slow things down a lot for you, if I'm doing my pull-down motion, this is about here, where I comfortably can go. If I had more maybe mobility, if my structure was slightly different, if I took a different grip, I might be able to access even lower. But right now, using my back muscles to stabilize, this is where I can get to. But of course, gravity will let me pull that weight right down to my chest. So if I started here, that first inch or so is actually not going to be using my body's full potential. And as a result, my body will start to compensate. My personal preference is to start to want to flare this elbow out and around so it's a little bit exaggerated, obviously. My body wants to do this. My body also wants to kink off to the side like so and arch my back more. And that becomes a more comfortable position for me to start to press from. Now, that there was obviously an exaggeration, but that's a compensatory pattern that my body wants to go through just to initiate that first press. Once it gets past that inch point, it's easy. My body can move up with some degree of symmetry. But the issue is, if I've already started off in the poor position and I've started moving in that poor position, on a neurological level, it's going to start to take over for the rest of the movement pattern. And that's where we start to see these compensatory patterns happening long term, and that will start to limit how much strength you can express, and it may even go down the road of creating shoulder impingement and shoulder pain. But it's definitely going to limit how much strength you can express and how much you can potentially build in terms of muscle mass through your shoulders. So what you'll find is, do this pull down motion, and you'll find a couple of things. First of all, you'll find what the comfortable grip is for you. You'll see for me here, when I pull down like this, my arms are at about how kind of wide that is. So if I grabbed in narrower or if I grabbed in wider, I would be in a less efficient position as well. Understand this, people. Your brain is very, 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 very intelligent, and it will find the most efficient pathway all the time. Just let it do its job. Don't worry about where your elbows are tucked to. Don't worry about how much you're arching or anything like that. Just perform the movement and set yourself up correctly, and your nervous system will take care of the rest. It will use the right muscles. But if you extend beyond what your nervous system, what your body's capable of, that's where you start to create all these other issues that then need to be managed long term. Now, a little addendum to this is people are going to ask, Eugene, what happens when we're doing this range of motion here off your chest? How do we then access this last couple of inches that you haven't been able to get to? Well, that's where we just change the grip up. So with the double overhand grip that I would need for a barbell press overhead, I can only get to about this kind of range here. But if I turn my hands into a neutral grip like this and had my elbows slightly tucked forward because of the neutral grip, now I can comfortably pull down even further. And I can even go below this point here with my back muscles controlling that very easily. So instead of using a barbell, of course now I'd be looking at using dumbbells instead. And the exact same movement would occur, where I can now pull the weight down to my body and press straight back up overhead. And that's where the cool thing is, the only two athletes who have to use a barbell overhead press and you have to train a barbell overhead press are Olympic lifters and CrossFitters. I guess you could probably make the case for strongman athletes as well, but everybody else in between, you don't have to just use the barbell. You can use the barbell, and it's a great movement to use as long as you know where your personal range is. But don't be afraid, of course, to use dumbbells. Don't be afraid to use the neutral grip bars. And of course, don't be afraid to use the bench support on a high incline or an upright incline, again, depending on your own mobility. So the big takeaway for this one mistake is also trying to find your personal range of motion. So for me, it's around here. But for you, it may be a little bit higher. Some people I've seen, they can only bring the bar down to maybe their nose or maybe their eye level before they start to lose that ability to extend their shoulder joint down below this position here. In which case, they'll only be doing a half range press. And that's completely fine. That's completely fine if they're using the stuck pronated grip barbell. They can then access the other ranges of motion using dumbbells, using machines, using whatever other variation they have available. So, that's mistake number one. What is mistake number two that I see people making? It is keeping their shoulder blades fixated in a back and down position the entire time. So it's commonly touted as a very, very good and healthy way to be training for shoulder health. Keep your shoulder blades pulled back into retraction and down into this depressed position. It keeps everything stable. It creates a good amount of extension through the body and allows you to press. Now, let's take away the individual differences. Where you can see for me personally, I've got a very, very, very mobile spine. So I can very easily create this overextension pattern in my body as I bring my shoulder blades back and down. Now, you might not have that. That's not what we're trying to focus on here. What I care more about, though, is that when people keep their shoulder blades pinned back and down the entire time, it really limits their ability to move properly because it's disrupting natural human movements. There is this thing, this rhythm that occurs in the body called scapulohumeral rhythm. To make it sound a little bit nerdy, we have two things that we care about. We care about your arm here flapping around in the wind, and we care about your shoulder blade in your back. Now, scapulohumeral rhythm means that for me to bring my arm from here, from A to B overhead, it's not just about this arm moving overhead. To allow this movement to be coordinated, my shoulder blade also has to move to a degree. I think from memory, for every 2 degrees of movement at this joint here, there should be 1 degree of rotation, upwards rotation happening at the shoulder blade. So here's where the issue arises. If you keep your shoulder blades pulled back and down the entire time and fixated, now when you go to move your upper arm bone here, this upper arm bone, sorry, you're going to find yourself very limited. And you can try it for yourself. Just sit there, pull your shoulder blades back and down, and try to bring your arms overhead as far as you can without moving your shoulder blades, or trying to limit the shoulder blade movements. And you'll find you get to like around maybe here-ish, and then you start to get really, really limited. And you're only able to really move like a penguin flapping its wings around. So, of course, when we're pressing, we need to create this movement. There has to be a degree of elevation. There has to be even a degree of maybe even protraction happening through the shoulder blades. But even then, don't think about that. All I want you to think about when you press is not keeping things pinned into a strict, rigid position. Let your body move the way that it was supposed to move. Let your nervous system do its job without trying to always think about scapula, shoulder blades pulled back and down as you try to press. Because you'll find then your elbows start moving into funny places. Your back starts moving into funny places. The range of motion starts getting limited and your strength starts to plummet. So, again, to run through this, I've found my good starting point. My shoulder blades are pulled back and down in the start position, but as I press up, I let them move. I don't think about keeping them pulled back and down the entire time like this when I'm going through the press, because that's going to limit the range of motion I can access. It's also going to limit the amount of strength that I can express through that bar. So there you have it, guys. 2 very, very simple, very common, and very, very overlooked errors that I see people making with their shoulder training, specifically around overhead pressing. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, please do give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.